Badasses in Tech is brought to you by Growth Stack Media. If you're looking to scale your business affordably through public relations, video production, or podcasting, we've got you covered. Visit growthstackmedia.com to get in touch today. Welcome to another episode of Badasses in Tech. Today, I'm joined by Blake Hall. Blake Hall is a former Army Ranger of 7 years, and today is currently the founder and CEO of ID.me. Blake, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for your service.
Of course, Summer. Thank you for having me on. Excited for this conversation.
Me too. So tell us a bit more about how you got started on this dynamic career path between military and to now being a founder and CEO in tech.
Yeah, sure. So I was a sophomore at Vanderbilt University when 9/11 happened, and it was a day that changed my life. I decided I wanted to be an Army Ranger that day because I knew I was going to lead young men into combat and wanted to play with the varsity. Fast forward, 5-6 years, ended up in Iraq leading a reconnaissance platoon of scouts and snipers, and our mandate was to run down high-value targets, so mostly al-Qaeda leadership and some of the al-Quds proxies and the Shia militias that were running around the country, causing a lot of suffering at that time. Right before we went into combat, we had attachments from the National Security Agency that embedded into our platoon. There's a scene from Zero Dark 30 called Tradecraft that is almost exactly what we did when we were over there in Iraq. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was getting a crash course in not just identity and some of the technical foundations of identity, but also in entrepreneurship, where you got a team, everyone's motivated, ready to go, but then you're just given a completely different mission set that you maybe didn't even anticipate. You just got to figure out how to make it work, and how to learn and grow and figure out how to drive the outcome, that you're after, where you're making a positive difference in the world. So I did that for 15 months. Love my guys. They actually, half of them just came back for my 40th birthday last year from all around the country. It was really cool. And then I went to Harvard Business School because I had a great boss who forced me. He told me he wasn't going to write me a letter of recommendation unless I applied to Harvard. So I wasn't planning on applying there, but was forced into it. And I started ID.me there as an academic project in late 2009. We incorporated in 2010, and in many ways it was a way to just find the sense of purpose that I felt while I was wearing the uniform after serving. And so today we've got we help people log in and prove their identity across 17 federal agencies, 40 states, and 600 plus consumer brands. Signed up 132 million Americans. So over half of American adults use ID.me as a social login and to prove who they are, and try not to screw it up.
I don't even know where to start with all that. First of all, I do recognize ID.me. I now that you've mentioned it, I think maybe going through airports or maybe going through concerts. I definitely remember kind of seeing the app notifications. So we'll get into that for sure. Let's talk a little bit about those years in combat. And you said something that really perked my ears up of you didn't realize that it was almost a training ground for entrepreneurship. Can you talk a little bit about what exactly you mean by that?
Yeah, I think, the difference between startups and established companies is that startups are looking for a secret in the world that's an unmet need that people don't know about. If people knew about it, if they knew that Uber, was going to be worth billions and billions of dollars, and folks would have started it before Travis Kalanick, or same thing with PayPal, with Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. And so in many ways, you have to be a bit contrarian to find the 0 to 1 opportunities that are out there in the market. And a lot of that process it's really about experimentation. It's just running different experiments to see if customers actually want what you're building. Will they pay for it? How many of those customers are there? Is there a big enough market to support a business? And so, the military is a little bit different in that our mission was assigned to us, go take down these vehicle bomb networks that are, setting off bombs. And so that at least you don't have to worry about that being a real problem. That's obviously a real problem, but how to use, the tools that were given to us when we hadn't had any training or experience on more of the tech side of it was all novel. And so, I think if you if if you do your job right as a leader and you define a worthy problem, then the next part of that is, can you lead a team to develop the right skills and habits and capabilities in order to influence and impact that problem in a way that leaves everyone that you're touching better off, for you kind of having been in the world. And I love leading teams that learn and that are accountable and that grow, working on problems that matter. And so I think that was the thing that was novel and different. And I really appreciate I had a boss that trusted me and didn't tell me how to do my job. He just gave me a task and let me go figure it out with my team. And that's one of the most fun parts of entrepreneurship. If you're working on a problem that matters, is that process of discovery and learning and growth, where at the end you can kind of look back and go, wow, like look what we figured out that nobody else had done, or to make a difference.
And to your point, having that opportunity, having the room to try and to experiment. You mentioned having that wonderful boss that kind of gave you the keys, didn't really tell you how to get where you were going, but gave you the tools to do it yourself. And I know that is super rewarding, and it builds confidence. You're almost like, okay, that was an idea, or maybe I'm a little delusional to even think that I could do something like this. And wow, with the right people and the right focus, everyone was able to contribute to a wonderful thing, like you're saying, a solution to a problem. So what exactly would you say? I mean, I know you described what you're doing with ID Me. What was that kind of light bulb moment during your time when you were like, this is a huge problem. There's nothing to solve this. What was that kind of moment for you?
Well, I think, it wasn't until some other things happened in the market later that I think, I put two and two together as far as the market opportunity. But what I learned hunting terrorists is that they have what we call a pattern of life that's quite different from normal people. So you're probably not switching your phone handset all the time and switching your SIM cards, and everything else to avoid detection. Probably not changing your phone number. I still have my phone number from Vanderbilt, 20 years ago. And so a hallmark of non-fraudulent users is tenure with things. Like, we tend to have our phones for 2 to 3 years. The SIM card is staying in that phone for the same amount of time. I've had my phone number for 2 decades. Bad guys don't do that. They are trying to do just enough in order to steal someone's identity, and they don't want to steal just one person's identity. They want to steal a lot of people's identity. So they will typically like register a phone number in somebody's name, to let it sit, for a few months or whatever, just enough in order to get over some security threshold, in order to say, hey, I've got a phone number that's tied to Summer's identity, and want to open up an account and get a loan, and so on and so forth. So later, as there were these data breaches that were happening, and then you had the rise, of the smartphone, and I realized it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a question and answer process about your like mortgage payment or what car you drove, when bad guys already have that information from data breaches, and using bots can answer the questions like faster and more efficiently than people can remember them. That maybe there's a different way that we need to approach verifying that you're you when you're online. And so that naturally leads to like, well, what do you have possession of that a bad guy doesn't? You have possession of your phone. You've had your phone number for a long time. And so just in that one signal, if you're looking at me, if that phone number has been tied to Blake Hall's identity for 20 years, and if a bad guy was like paying the phone bill and setting it up for 2 decades, I mean, that's almost like a tip your cap. Great job.
Oh my gosh. So that happens?
No, they don't do that. They won't do 2 decades. They'll do a few months because they're running a business. Right. They want a quick hit. And so you can leverage signals that non-fraudulent people have that aren't terrorists, that aren't, defrauding banks and everything else. And that separates, it's like a power distribution. That's going to separate, like 80% of your non-fraudulent users from people who are fraudulent. There's still some other populations that you need to use other signals for in order to protect. But I think that's the basic principle of what I had learned in the military. And then when I just realized looking at the market, oh my gosh, I know a thing or two about a different way to verify identity as this legacy method was really falling over. It's cool because it's just like learning a new skill and then figuring out that skill is useful in other places.
I had no idea about the phone tenure. It makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
I just assume as a civilian, it shows how, I guess, ignorant we are to certain elements of things, or maybe we're just so consumed with our own day to day that I would have never thought that criminals change their phone number.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying it's a pattern that helps you kind of identify one cohort versus another. And that's almost kind of the basis of what ID.me is about. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think we're all ignorant of a lot of stuff. The more I know, like the more you're aware of like how little you really understand in different fields. And that's why it's amazing leading a team where, somebody who's an expert in, sort of machine learning and somebody who's, an expert in, authentication, you need each other in order to win as a team because there's so much craftsmanship and mastery that goes into all these different fields. And so that's what the military had given me. It had given me a core skill and a source of credibility that it turned out is quite useful because knowing who you're dealing with when you're interacting with someone, whether socially or in a financial transaction, it's actually the trust layer of our society. And it's the difference between a stranger walking up to you cold and you're like, I have no idea who you are, versus a trusted friend saying, here's so-and-so, they're wonderful. Like you should get to know them. They're great. And when you have that trusted reference. And so that's kind of what we're doing with ID.me and it's what Visa did with payments, and that you could have like a merchant and a customer who've never seen each other before, but Visa acts as that trusted friend in the middle to say, everything's going to be fine if, there's a credit card transaction for like $1,000. ID.me is doing the same thing just when it comes to, hey, Summer's claiming that she's a podcast host and maybe you've got some benefits that are out there for podcast hosts. If she's willing to share that with you, ID.me is the tool that verifies that what she's claiming about herself is in fact true in a way that the other party can rely on, so then they can give you a benefit and know they're not being ripped off.
Yeah, it's super important. And I love what you said about knowing the individual and knowing that skill and how you were referencing it to craftsmanship. You're absolutely right. And I feel like because of all of the different details and nuances that make up one single segment of business, or in my case, I'm very much in the marketing field. Mm-hmm. When I first started, I thought marketing's marketing, like you write words, you do a story and whatever. Yeah. No, there are people that spend their entire lives in one niche of it. Mm-hmm. So I can see where having to know someone so intimately in the military, in that setting where you're like, are you a friend or are you not safe? Yep. Like you have to push yourself to get to know people on that deeper level and their skills, what they like, what they don't, what they're good at. It's a great reminder. I think we're all so busy. Sometimes we just think like, no, we can put 2 or 3 things together and it'll be fine. And then you're halfway through and you're like, oh, we needed way more of this, or we really could have used an extra person there. I don't know if you ran into any of those challenges along the way.
Well, I mean, this is where I was actually talking with Simon Sinek in LA a few weeks ago, which is really cool. And we were talking about something called real skill, which is when you figure out, a position, and you could say marketing, and marketing is such an abstract concept. It could mean a lot of different things, but what you really need to figure out is like, what are the real skills that that marketer needs to have based on what you're trying to do? And so part of, my learning and development was just to fully appreciate how nuanced different types of go-to-market could be, right? So if you're in a business to business type of, enterprise like software solution, the segment of the market that you're selling to matters quite a lot. Are you selling to enterprise customers where they're going to want to see Gartner reports and Forrester reports? You're going to have to walk into a CIO or their lieutenant, at a huge company and like really be on your game because they're busy people. They need you to provide value to them and explain. Mid-market, is kind of the Goldilocks, versus small and medium-sized businesses where you could run an inside sales operation. And so if you could get a salesperson and a marketer who are incredibly successful in inside sales, in smaller contract values like $20,000 to $30,000, you put them into an enterprise go-to-market where average contract value is $100,000 plus, or maybe $500,000 plus or $1 million plus. They're gonna be like a fish out of water because the skills. It's almost like asking a soccer player to go be great at basketball. It's
Right.
They're both athletes, but all the things that they've learned and the knowledge that's relevant over here doesn't necessarily translate.
Hey everyone, hope you're enjoying the episode so far. If you haven't already, why don't you take a second to click follow or subscribe on the platform you're tuning into so that you won't miss a second of Badasses in Tech. Also, if you're really loving what you're hearing today, why don't you drop us a 5-star review or leave us a positive comment, as it really helps the podcast grow and helps us continue doing what we're doing, which is helping people become a badass.
And then obviously consumer has its own thing. Is it an impulse purchase? Is it a deliberate, considered purchase like an automobile? And then when you realize like to be good at any one of those go-to-markets takes years and decades of really, really deep learning and experience, you begin to appreciate if you as a leader and manager can't define the actual skills you need and what type of go-to-market you're in and bring clarity to the organization around that, you're going to end up with a hodgepodge of athletes who have sort of a random assortment of skills.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of founders don't make it as their business starts to scale, is because they don't fully appreciate the real skill they need in different roles in order to win. And then even if they did, then how do you screen and select for it to make sure you're getting the right profile? Hiring is really hard. So I spend a lot of my time thinking about that because it's really important, and it all starts with like self-awareness of what you need in order to succeed and how to go find it.
What are some of your tips or methods on building that roadmap or identifying what you need? Maybe the word I'm looking for is forecasting, because I'm sure some of our listeners, and myself included, who are entrepreneurial, starting up their own venture, or maybe taking on a new leadership position, or they're in a new role. How would you help them navigate this world if they were to start from maybe step one?
Yeah, I mean, there's usually, so we're B2B2C, so we've got business customers and we've got our users, and then there's bad guys. We wouldn't exist if there weren't bad guys, trying to commit fraud. So when you're forecasting, you really want to think about, at least the way that we think about strategy is what do those three sets of stakeholders want from us, or how are they going to impact us maybe more accurately, and then how should we think about responding to that and contingency plans. So when I was in the military, I led about 450 combat patrols in Iraq. I could count on one hand the number of combat patrols that went the way that we drew it up on the base and thought it was going to do.
Right.
You get hit by a roadside bomb and ambushed, you kind of got to deal with that, and it's going to disrupt your plans. So I think in terms of forecasting, you have to say, well, what do our customers want us to build? And so for IDMe, we started with verifying military folks to keep them safe so that they didn't have to share their social security number to get a free blooming onion from the Outback on Veterans Day. Crazy, like don't trade your social for a fried vegetable, veteran, please. And so But then our customers started to say, hey, can you do this for students? Can you do it for teachers? Can you do it for first responders? Can you do it for senior citizens? Can you do it for, interior decorators and designers? And like, depending on the industry, we're like, okay, so our customers want a lot of stuff from us in that dimension. But then we're like, well, where else do military families want to be? They probably want to be able to log into Veterans Affairs. That's how I could use my physical ID. So then there's like what we want to do for our users, but then we're also now responding to all these customers that we've signed up. And then there's bad guys who, like, as you and I talk right now, the amount of fraud tied to generative AI, where generative AI, like the evil cousins of ChatGPT, it's pretty crazy. So we saw in 2022, over a 90-day window, there were about 190,000 accounts, largely tied to West Africa, that were targets of scams. Over the same 90-day window in 2023, that number had risen to 1.3 million.
I thought 90 was bad.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Right. Yeah. So in that case, you're like, all right, they've trained these large language models for evil. The syntax and the grammar it's not the old school Nigerian Prince email where you could kind of be like, come on. It's really, really sophisticated. And we're also looking at data from the Identity Theft Research Center that shows that 16% of identity theft victims contemplate suicide. It's really sad.
Well, yeah, because they're probably like, my life is over. My savings are just drained or whatever.
That's
Oh
right.
my
New York
gosh.
Times just did an article where this like gentleman, he lost like $700,000, all of his retirement savings.
I just got chills saying that.
Yeah. And so, and it's up from 10% last year. And we think, we don't know exactly why, but we think it's probably because these generative AI tools are so believable and so good that the batting average has increased in terms of people who wouldn't fall for it before, but are falling for it now. And then just the feelings of shame and guilt and everything else that go along with like losing your family's retirement. So we feel a deep sense of responsibility to keep people safe so that that doesn't happen to them. And these government agencies and financial institutions don't lose money. And when you're looking at the roadmap, you have to say, well, what we'd want to do is we'd want to be at more places that these segments of our user base want to be: military, families, low-income taxpayers, and so on. But what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to respond to what our customers throw us into for use cases and what bad guys are going to do. So, this is a challenge of growth where you kind of have three stages. You've got operating at scale, you've got startup, which is crazy, and then you've got growth in the middle where you're trying to build a scalable system and keep up, which is somewhere in between. Like you still have to figure out the right way. And, and the approach and the playbook that you would use for one, won't work for the other, which is also a different type of skill, which is like stage of company. And so when we think about forecasting, we're balancing what we want to do with how we think control is going to be taken away from us by customers or fraudsters. And that's really important for communications so that you both know what you need, but you also have contingency plans so that you're ready. And honestly, combat is a great teacher on the importance of contingency plans back to the beginning, because if you're not helping to tell the team, these are the things that might happen, and if they do, we're just going to have to drop everything and go run to the sound of the guns. Like literally, if it's Gen AI fraud and we got to get the machine learning stuff tuned up, it keeps everyone on the same page. Some people don't like that amount of like volatility. Some people love it. And it becomes important for culture and the type of people that you hire as well, who don't mind all of the pace and the variety of challenges that get thrown at you in growth.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. I'm hearing, definitely communication context as well. Like that example that you shared, if we're starting to hear guns, drop what you're doing and run. Like having that extra context within the communication is even more important. And I feel like we just assume that people know what's up here in our brains, and we're like, oh yeah, we've been talking about this every single day for the last quarter. Of course, we're all on the same page. And then there goes that go live day and something fell through the cracks. So I think that's really important that that piece on context and having that open communication system, allowing your team members, if there is kind of a challenge or something that is starting to bubble up, that going back to trust, they feel safe. They trust you enough to kind of say, hey, there's a problem here and I have a solution, and we might be able to get to market faster this way,
Yeah.
or we may be able to cut costs this way. So I love your approach. It sounds very much like you're kind of balancing a lot of different pieces of the pie while forecasting, like you're listening to your customers, your employees. And it goes back to what we were just talking about of the skill and the knowledge, and the craftsmanship of one specific kind of niche. I from my understanding, there are entities that kind of speak on behalf of a large population, right? The global population. And then there's folks that are very specialized. So I could see where everyone is wanting the same goal. We all want to be safe. We all want the best internet, the safest internet.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting, right? That because of our own unique perspectives and values and all of that we might not see the same thing, like you're saying, glass half full, glass half empty type of thing. So
yeah, I think humans are biased in many different ways, but they're especially biased in that against change, right? So if you were to think about a technology like self-driving cars, and as an example, I don't know off the top of my head how many people die from drunk driving every year, but I assume it's a bunch, and just tired driving and all the accidents that go along with it. And so instead of saying, well, if like 100,000 people die every year and we could bring it down to like 10,000, often the conversation becomes, well, look at these 10,000 people that were killed by self-driving cars, not at the fact that you saved 90,000 lives, which is better. And so, it's a weird form of conservatism that actually holds back progress in terms of the metric that matters, which is keeping people alive. And we just have this innate resistance to change that as an innovator is pretty frustrating at times, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, look, like it's like 9 times better. Like, why wouldn't you want to?
You're like, the answer is right here.
But people don't like giving up like personal control, even though humans are often like terrible operators. The feeling of control that you have when you have the wheel versus letting an algorithm drive or make a decision, people don't like that. Right. But it's irrational in many ways.
How would you say ID.me and what you and the team are doing, how is that helping to alleviate some of this, if at all?
Well, so what we do, we meet the federal standards for privacy and safety that are set by NIST, which is part of the Department of Commerce. That's the first thing. Like everything that we do, we've worked with the Department of Commerce and NIST for a long time to have that trust mark, so that we have an independent auditor to say, this is what we do in terms of securing your data, cybersecurity. This is what we do in terms of proving that you're you. And then we don't sell data. So that positioning is really important. Like we view the data that we have as your data, that we're fiduciaries of it. Right. And so you can decide if your data is shared. What we sell is trust to let the person know, very similar to Visa. The incumbents in the market that we're in are largely data brokers, and these data brokers have harvested people's data. They sell them in a lot of different ways. Duke's Sanford School of Public Policy just released a report that showed they sell military family and personnel data to any entity, including overseas entities, for like 12 cents a record, which, as a third generation soldier and a family full of service members, I think should be illegal. Can't believe it's not illegal. But that's got to stop.
Scary. Yeah. I mean, what do we do? Like, what do we do about that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, what I'm trying to do with ID.me is say, hey, it needs to be a first party informed consent model of data and how it's shared, that you give the power to control data and to prevent identity theft back to Americans, and then have a transparent exchange. And if Summer wants to share a little bit of data to get, a more personalized experience, cool.
Yeah.
But knock on the front door and ask her if it's okay. And if it's not,
Please.
whatever, don't track you with cookies and, sell your data at all these different places. And it ends up getting used in ways that you would almost certainly not approve of if you were aware of it. So in terms of the metrics, our scoreboard is the pass rate through the digital channel to get access through the web versus like call center or in person, time spent verifying, cost per verification, and fraud rate. So for instance, like at the IRS where we're the login, if you're a victim of tax refund fraud, it takes an average of 2 years to finish that investigation. So
Oh my gosh.
yeah, if you need your refund, to pay your rent or whatever, 2 years of waiting is a pretty severe, penalty, and probably the worst thing that could happen to you in terms of just your life and access to funds and all the headache that'll go into dealing with the government, through that. So what the data shows is that at IRS, at Social Security, and then also most recently with the Virginia Unemployment Agency, Virginia Employment Commission, we have doubled pass rates. So about 40% of Americans could pass the identity verification process before with data brokers. Now it's over 80%. And at Virginia, we reduced the call center volume by 54%. And then the data shows that for low-income Americans, we close about 75% of the digital divide because disproportionately low-income Americans don't have credit history or accurate credit information or address. So that's a really important part of what we do here is we not only keep customers and Americans safe, we're also like dramatically increasing equality in terms of access, especially for our most vulnerable and historically underserved communities.
That is wonderful. So can you tell me a little bit about what y'all are up to these days?
Yeah, I think the generative AI fraud stuff is front and center. So we're already seeing it was large language models and text last year that we had to respond to with our machine learning models. Now we're seeing a dramatic rise in deepfakes and also voice biometrics. So this is the whole Sam Altman and Scarlett Johansson are going back and forth over whether they cloned her voice or not.
Right.
But the reality is you could have a threat actor out of Southeast Asia who's speaking in Chinese and it's translated into fluent English without an accent using, voice biometrics that might sound like you on like a telephone call to someone you love, like your husband or someone in your family. And there are going to have to be tools to protect call centers and websites against those types of attacks. So we're kind of gearing up because we can already see that wave is coming, where you're not going to be able to trust what you're looking at over even a video call like right now without having some type of authentication to make sure that my face is real and that your face is real and that we're actually talking to each other, that our voices are authentic.
Wow. Okay. I can see where this is headed. Almost like right now, Zoom, you have to type in the punch code, like the password code to be able to let in. You're saying we might in the future have to put our thumbprint or speak our voice or give a magic code or do something to authenticate not only our presence, but like our actual being. And if we're where we actually are, who we actually are. I'm as you're talking, I'm really getting a solid picture of what we're talking about here. And in the middle of our conversation, I was getting scared. I was getting scared. But now I'm like, okay, I feel a little bit more at ease because we have people like you and your team and other organizations that are really thinking deeply about all of these things. And it is a breath of fresh air because the news every day is talking about the Scarlett Johansson thing or deep fakes, whatever it is. I read a report that pretty much if anyone has a subscription to anything, you're most likely you have data somewhere that shouldn't be.
Probably. Yeah.
And that's not fun to know, but that we're excited to to have some folks in our corner like yourselves fighting the good fight. How do you? I imagine the AI wave. That was very early to kind of indicate. Everyone has been talking about that, but what are some other indicators of trends or watch outs that you think about, whether it's from, again, like building that business perspective,
Yeah.
or even maybe more so from like a security kind of trend perspective?
Well, I think what I get excited about is, you've got the use cases tied to AI for good, where it's the agentic, stuff that they're talking about now as OpenAI is about to release a new model where it cannot just respond to a query, but it could actually perform a set of tasks. So maybe it figures out, hey, this is how Summer likes to travel. Like this is where she would book, her seat on a flight. This is the hotel and the hotel room and how she'd think about cost and everything else. And it could just go out and be your personal assistant to do those things, right? So that's cool. It could save people a lot of time. I mean, even just like you think about strategy and thinking, if an AI could just figure out how you think, we get tired as humans. But if you almost have like a chief of staff or something that you could be like, here's all these different concepts I'm thinking about as CEO. I need to translate this into like a concept of operations, that gives focus and alignment down to the teams.
Right.
That more advanced set is really, really neat. And I think maybe to make it, more personal, after marriage, like my wife went through the name change process and it's just brutal, all the different.
I have yet to start it, Blake. I am hesitating, and my husband's like, "Are you going to change your name?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I want to, but it's daunting. So I'm ready for this. Let's hear it."
Yeah. So in order for government agencies to do things like changing your name, which is a pretty serious thing, they have to know that you're you and that you gave permission. So the AI layer doesn't actually get to go to work to make your life easier to say, "Hey, Summer, like, do you want to change like your name? Cool. What do you want to change it to?" It would need trust from a digital wallet like ID.me to say, nope, we verified that Summer, that actually was her that gave the permission. Now the AI agent could go off and do work. And so that's a really exciting use case that could meaningfully improve people's life, keep them safe on the authentication side, but then make their life more convenient and better by saving them time that you don't have to waste. And then there's the defensive side, which is all the stuff around the scams and identity theft, which has increased by 267% since 2010. It's an unsustainable trend, and a lot of people are thinking about or killing themselves, and so we're trying to harness both, which is like let's play defense and keep the lid on Pandora's box with all the bad guys here. Let's also just look at some really annoying workflows that will take away days of people's lives and give them those days back where they can do other stuff like hang with their dog or go for a run or do whatever the heck it is that you want to do, and you don't have to like go to multiple government agencies.
I'm starting not to feel as kind of doom and gloom. And it's not just this conversation. It's everyone's talking about just where is this going? And it's going to be nothing but bad. And I think this is one of the first conversations I've had recently where it's very hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
And especially coming from someone who spent so much time with the bad guys. Like, I fully trust that you know where their brain is, you know how they're thinking, and knowing that there's even more folks like yourself at ID.me and beyond, that it makes me feel that much more safe. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing the story and giving us a little bit more about ID.me. It sounds like there's going to be even more cutting edge things coming out, like you were talking about, being a little bit more of that gap stop for some of those AI things, name changes. So sounds like there's a lot on the horizon for the company.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and it's important too that it's a scary world out there if you think about what's going on, with Iran and Russia and China, and it's really important that America stays at the bleeding edge of technology, especially around authentication, deepfakes, generative AI. So we're trying to do our part to make sure that the good guys always have a leg up on other folks who might want to send us back to a different time in the world when people don't have the freedoms that we take for granted today. And so we take that super seriously.
Absolutely. One thing I'll ask before we go, what is one thing or a handful of things that individuals can do to protect the country?
Well, I mean, I think there wasn't a lot that they could do when the market was dominated by data brokers, because you're always playing like whack-a-mole. And so my contribution to American society was, let's create a consumer-controlled network where if you register your identity, if you go to the irs.gov or ssa.gov and click sign in or whatever to VA, once your name, date of birth, and social is registered on ID.me, and if you lock it down with like a pass key, which could be like Touch ID or Face ID, either on your laptop or on your phone, no one else can claim your identity across the network. And so that would mean at IRS, at Social Security, many different state apps, they would literally have to figure out how to get your passkey and your device away from you in order to steal your identity. And so that is a level of built-in identity theft protection that is super important. So we would encourage folks to do that as fast as they can, because once their identity is secure and is locked up, then they're good to go. There are also other services that are out there that help you delete your data from data brokers. And so in terms of in a quick Google search would turn that up. Yeah. So they're kind of like agents that, with your permission, will go out and try to find all of your data and get it out of these data brokers so that it's not visible to folks who you don't want to have it. The sad reality is that for most Americans, I could buy their social security number right now on the dark web for less than the price of a Chipotle burrito. So
it is kind of lunchtime right now, so that's making me hungry. Oh, well, yeah, that's what I mean. You come with this great balance of like, yeah, this is the reality, but we have a solution. So I appreciate that, Blake. And where can folks find you?
Yeah, so on Twitter, I'm at Blake_Hall. On X, now can't keep up with that. But then and then on LinkedIn, if you just Google Blake Hall and ID.me in the search bar, then I'll pop up there too.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for tuning in. Give Blake a follow, check out ID.me, and let's do what we can to keep ourselves safe.
Thank you so much, Summer. See ya.
Badasses in Tech is brought to you by Growth Stack Media. If you're looking to scale your business affordably through public relations, video production, or podcasting, we've got you covered. Visit growthstackmedia.com to get in touch today.